going on? It's the RapNerd, and with Scream 7 releasing over the past weekend, I figure it's a great time to rank the franchise. And I wanted to re-rank it because my list has changed quite a bit since Scream 6. I know I put out a ranking back then, but this is a franchise that I watch annually, sometimes a few times annually. And since then, I've just started analyzing the films a little bit different, especially with the changing of hands of what's going on. I've really started enjoying things from more and enjoying things less from others. And I just love reattacking these lists, especially with the recent one that dropped and being able to look at the whole series. And as I've grown myself and as my life journey has taken me different places, it's always fun to look back at these films. So I'm going to do something a little different than what I've done. Usually for all of my lists, I've ranked the movies in ascending order, starting from the one that I have at the bottom and work my way up. But this time I'm going to do it in reverse. I'm going to do it in descending order, because I think for most Scream fans, I would say 90% of us are going to have Scream 1 at the number 1 spot. So it's not really any type of build of there's not really a build of suspense, because we already know that number 1 is going to be Scream. I feel like it's more fun as well because it's a different way that I can talk about the movies. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this. And of course, at the number 1 spot is Scream 1 from '96. That is literally in my top 5 movies of all time. I think it might be number 2 right behind Halloween, because horror is not only my favorite genre, but slashers are my favorite subgenre. And this is the reason modern day horror is what it is. Scream is in the DNA of everything that we see now. And of course, I don't need to explain this. It's a classic that keeps giving and continues to give us more and more as the years have gone, and it stands the test of time, being a complete flip on the genre, subverting expectations, with masterful writing from Kevin Williamson and even more masterful direction from the late and great Wes Craven, who is also one of my favorite directors of all time as well. So easily, Scream 1 is the blueprint. So at the number 2 spot for me is Scream 2. Now, I absolutely love this movie. My love has not changed at all. If anything, it's just grown, because the franchise is actually built on the back of this movie. I think that it was extremely clever to follow up a perfect movie like Scream with this to completely flip that movie on its head. I think it was pretty genius to take the real events of Scream 1 and turn it into a parody slash movie and set it in the same world for the sequel. And the dynamic it creates is extremely interesting because it exposes the entire world to what happened. Usually stories like this, where a real act happens, an adaptation isn't made until like way years later, when everybody kind of is over what happened. But I mean, this is like following a few years after, so you can only imagine how that would affect the victim of the killer, all of them, and the survivor. And I love how they use that to push Sydney forward and create new problems. And I also love the fact that it is yet again a commentary on the space of horror, especially with black folks. I love that opening sequence, and that is literally my favorite opening behind the first one. I mean, to have a kill happen in the theater with amongst a bunch of Stab fans who are so bloodthirsty for watching violence on screen that they don't even notice a woman getting killed in the theater until it's too late. And the fact that it also plays, like I said, on the trope of black folks getting killed first, with 2 black folks get taken out, and they're even talking about that as the movie is beginning. And to be done by 2 actors of Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar, because at the time they were like superstars. So for them to just redo this opening role blew my mind at the time. And even as the movie, continues, you have Joel and Elise in the film that also play 2 opposite sides of the black trope in not only horror movies, but in real life. How you have Elise, who is literally hanging around all of the madness and chooses to stay in it, knowing she probably shouldn't. And then Joel was literally like, I'm getting the hell out of here. I ain't got shit to do with this. It's too much for me, which is what a black person would do in real life. And then the connection here, having it be Billy's mom coming to avenge her son's death, perfect. And you can literally see the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, because she manipulates Timothy's character the same way that Billy manipulated Stu. So just a perfect way to bring those 2 movies together. And I'll forever love that movie because of what it did with the first. So at the number 2 spot is Scream 2. So at the number 3 spot for me is Scream 5. I love this entry. I feel like this is the perfect requel that you could do for a whodunit story, because not only were they able to bring in the story of Sydney here, but they were also able to introduce new characters who also had lineage to the original story that weren't directly connected to Sydney. Like, this is a whole different branch and lane that you could go, because oftentimes in these movies, and I'm not saying it's never been done, but it's usually we catching up with the survivor and how their life is after a tragic story. I don't think I've ever seen it where we catch up with a child of the killers to this capacity, like, because it's a lot of trauma that they're dealing with. For one, they don't know their parent because they were killed. Two, they have to grow up knowing that their parent was a killer, and I'm sure that comes with scrutiny from everyone around them. Well, and in her case, it was kind of hidden. And then you have the spirit of her dad fucking with her the entire time. And just that aspect of her character has so much that you can do and even say. And I feel like they had a whole lot of fun with Samantha. And the other thing that I love about the film is the fact that it was a product of the time, and I can look back now, all of these years later, and really say that, because this movie came out in a post-pandemic world where fandom wars, I feel like, were at an all-time high when the pandemic hit, because everyone's just at home on their phones, so we have nothing better to do than to go back and forth. So for it to pinpoint toxic fandoms and use it in this way, where there's a fandom that becomes so toxic that they want to bring Ghostface to life, and these movies are like Bibles to the point they're doing this craziness, was just perfect. Because we saw this happen with almost every fandom out there. Like, if you name any big fandom, there were some online wars happening, from the DCEU versus the Snyder Cut, from Spider-Man fans versus the MCU, James Gunn fans versus the MCU, Star Wars fandom, sports. Shit was crazy because we had nothing better to do than be on our phones. And this was the representation of that. And I even love that this movie built an entirely new cast that worked well together, had charisma, established their own new rules, also having the legacy characters included but not the centerpiece. It was perfect, which is kind of like, a big they got rid of it, but it is what it is. I'm not here to harp on that, but all of those things make Scream 5 such a great movie to me, and I had that at the number 3 spot. So at the number 4 spot, surprisingly, if you've seen any of my other lists, this movie was always my least favorite, but again, at the 4 spot is Scream 4. I really love this movie. I just liked it, but now I've grown into loving it, despite it still having some of the things that I didn't like, and I don't think they're issues, they're just things that I am not really a huge fan of. I think the movie is overly meta in spaces. Like the opening sequence, I feel like is a bit much. We're trying to play with the meta stuff. But again, I think it was the beginning of super fandom, and the way that it put it on display is more real than ever in today's time, with the fact that the internet has brought so many people together to do things like this. And I also really love the motivations at play when it came to Jill, because I could 100% see that. You have this family member who went through trauma and came out of this tragic situation, so everybody's attention is on her, so you have that attention. But then you kind of have this person also taking advantage of their situation and exploiting it by creating this book and getting this countrywide fame and riches off of the situation through the book. So having that jealous cousin wanting to plot on Sydney to dethrone her and become a victim herself is so real in today's day, where in the 2020s with the blowing up of social media, even before to the 2020s, because Scream 4 was 2011, and that was like the brink of all of the social media popping off. In the later 2010s to the 2020s, clout is more important than money nowadays, and people will do anything for the clout. So the fact that Jill did this, it just speaks to the times that we are in. And again, I always knew that, but for some reason, after watching Scream 6 and revisiting these, that part really was highlighted to me, because back then, prior, I thought that was kind of stupid. I was like, who would do that for fame? But lo and behold, people will do that type of shit, even if it means going on a mass murder and even making themselves look like they were harmed themselves. And this goes also into the constant thing of the person leading the pack with these kills is manipulating somebody else. Yet again, similar to Billy and Stu. Then also, I think this is when Ghostface really entered a whole different level of savage as well, because he was going crazy in this movie. And this was Wes Craven's last movie, the king of horror, in my opinion. You get all of those sequences that prey on fear in the best way possible. So yeah, I do have a different type of love for this film now. So at the number 4 spot is Scream 4. So at the number 5 spot for me is Scream 6, and I actually loved this movie up to the third act. I think that what they did with this film was great, taking what happened in Scream 5 with this character who was a product of her serial killer dad and who just ended up killing somebody else, causing this uproar that she had to leave where she was at to a whole different state, and that following her to the point where everyone's looking at her crazy as well, and she becoming overly protective of her estranged sister. It was a perfect, formula to make a great Scream movie, and this is one without Sidney that I still think for the most part works. I just think that the reveal and how that kind of unraveled was a bit but still it worked. And I love the setting change of having Scream take place in like a bigger metropolitan, not even a bigger metropolitan, super metropolitan like New York, because there are just new things that you can play with. I love that they use the infrastructure to their full capacity here, taking place in, apartments and the city park. The bodega scene was incredible. And then that extra little seed of it being in Halloween is a plus for me as well. And I love how brutal and personal it felt. Like that opening kill scene was crazy for it to kind of be swapping hands of things. You had Samara get murked off in a very brutal way, only for the killer to be revealed as part of this cult. And then he gets killed off. So I'm like, it opened up so many cans of worms, from the idea of the cult, like I said, and just the fact that Sam has to now cope with the fact that she is very much so like her dad when it comes to protecting her. It's like, I'll kill these motherfuckers like Billy told her. So despite the third act being what it was, and I don't know, something about it, I can't really put it into words. I always find myself kind of tuning out when I get to that third act because it just seems hyper elevated and nonsensical. And I do like it for that, but I also don't for that. It's weird. I don't know. I gotta do a deep dive in my psyche as to why that third act doesn't really do it for me. But either way, I still enjoy the hell out of the movie. So at the number 5 spot is Scream 6. At the number 6 spot is Scream 3. Now, I don't think anyone should be surprised at this movie. This one is silly as hell, and I feel like this one had a goal to just be the comedy of the series because it is so out there, and it's actually a parody of itself because you get to see the different counterparts who play in the stab movies align with the real people of the world of Scream. And I thought it was interesting, but again, it's just so damn campy and over the top that it just cannot be taken seriously. The whole thing about her brother being Roman and she never knew this whole time. It was a bit much. But I will say, I love it, and I actually watch this movie more than any other recent ones. Like that original trilogy is still like my favorite 3 that I watched the most. But I can't deny the quality. There are a lot of issues that you can pick out if you go looking, because it's not even trying to be serious in the slightest bit. And this one more is fun to me because of the nostalgia it taking place in the late 90s. Of course, it released in the 2000s, but those 2000s movies still had a vibe of the late 90s. So I love it because of that. It feels really classic. And I always love movies about movies. But because it's so silly, I couldn't put it, over the other ones like I have done in the past, because the motivations are literally ridiculous and out of left field. That Sidney had a secret brother this whole time. So at the number 6 spot is Scream 3. And at the 7th spot for me is Scream 7. I just did a whole spoiler review on that film as well as my regular review as to things wrong. I just think that the connective tissue with the killers and the reveal are just flat out bad. I don't know what the hell that was. I think if that would have been stronger, this movie could have definitely been, not nearly below the line as the others, but man, that reveal, having to be the mom and the psych ward guy, I was just like, what are we doing here? Like, we're just rehashing Scream 4 now? But other than that though, I do like the idea of following Sidney's daughter, even though again, she should have had more screen time if that's what this is going to be about. And it's a fun slasher movie. I think it's a fun modern day slasher, which is definitely a step below what the Scream franchise has been. So I'm not going to harp on that too much. If you want more thoughts on that, be sure to watch my spoiler talk Scream 7 video for more details. And I'm going to leave it there. So let me know in the comments, what is your ranking of the Scream franchise? Feel free to talk spoilers. Let's have an open discussion, and I'm all ears for whatever you may think. And also, this is just my list. I'm not being disrespectful to your list. If you don't agree, gotta put it out there because the internet is crazy. And of course, if you like this kind of content, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you already are subscribed, thank you. And until next time, peace.
RapNerd Productions, no capping, that's word to mommy. Instead of banking on it, now rapping is just a hobby.